I want to give you some basic knowledge and ideas on human rights. Human rights means the rights demanded for the all round development of human beings. You know that the human beings, are living in the different societies all over the world for the betterment of a human life, for ensuring all round development, and for well being of the human beings. The nations of the world must take or must undertake a lot of welfare activities. Therefore, human rights are the basic needs of our times. In the first half of the 20th century, we had already seen the two great world wars, First World War and the Second World War. The First World War was occurred from 1914 and ended in the year 1918. Similarly, the Second World War had taken place in the year 1939 and was ended in the year 1945. You imagine the then world had suffered a lot. The human being had faced a great danger, shortage of food, loss of a great human power, human potentiality, sources of economic had already puzzled. There was imbalance, there was indiscipline. Everywhere there was fear of war, terror, danger. So the human beings during the First and Second World War had suffered a great loss. So these experiences, these bitter experiences had made the intellectual masses of the world, made the top countries of the world. It affected a lot to the entire humankind of the world. So the United Nations of organization after the end of the Second World War had taken a drastic step for declaration of human rights, for the protection of human rights, for securing the human rights through a declaration. You know, on 10th December 1948, the UNO Charter had declared this day as the day of human rights. So it organized a good number of countries and welcomed them to be united for the protection and security of the human rights, not only of their own states, but also protection of the human rights of the entire world. So, United Nations Charter expressed the resolve to uh, to protect human rights and fundamental freedoms of the citizens. So 10th December 1948, there was the adoption of United Declaration on Human Rights. Protection of human rights and security of fundamental freedoms are the basic needs of the people. Let us discuss regarding the protection of the human rights in India. How the government of India is to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens. How our government guarantees for the protection of our freedoms. You know that the Constitution of India had given elaborately the expression, the opinion, the promise, the resolution, the determination for the protection of human rights in India. Part 3 and Part 4 of the Indian Constitution had categorically described the systematic principles of the protection of human rights. You know, the Constituent Assembly was for the first time organized on 9th December 1946. Some initial activities were undertaken by the Constituent Assembly of India. It was under the British regime. Some of the top Indian leaders had attempted to form a Constituent Assembly, and they had meet themselves secretly, discreetly, because they were all in different jails. They were put by the Britishers in different jails of Indian territory. So they had deliberations, they had taken a lot of difficulties for corroborating their ideas regarding the formation of the Constituent Assembly. However, they attempted, they sincerely tried, they labored hard, and they had taken 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days with a view to completing the draft proposals of the Constituent Assembly. So the Constituent Assembly had presented a nice constitution to the people of India on 26th day of November 1949. The Constituent Assembly had completed all of its drafts and it was ready for the opening. So from 19 December 1946 to 26th November 1949, this period is a great period. This period symbolizes so many trials, organization of a good number of meetings, expression of their opinions among the members of the Constituent Assembly. So, however, the Constitution was ready for the presentation to the people of India. But on 26th day of January 1950, the Constitution was for the first time carried out, because on this day, the first Prime Minister of India, the first President of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, was elected unanimously. And for the first time, India had adopted the democratic form of government, the republican form of government. So, the Constituent Assembly, the Constitution under Part 3 and 4, as well as the preamble of the Constitution, all such criteria, all such institutions have nicely presented the dignity, the utility, and the systems and the procedures of protection of the fundamental freedoms and rights of the Indian people so far. Besides, there are some basic apparatus, state apparatus, and there are some important institutions which are meant for the protection of the fundamental rights, human rights. For example, after the independence, when Britishers had left us on 15th day of August 1947, India has got independent. India has got independence. India became independence. So we have adopted the independence nature of our judiciary. There is a separation of judiciary. There is a separation of judiciary from the executive. A government has three units: legislature, executive, and judiciary. The legislature is such a part which legislates the laws for the whole of the country. Legislature is to legislate the laws. Judiciary, the executive, is there to implement the laws which are made in the floor of the legislature. But one thing I want to make you give a clarification, that the legislature makes laws, all right. The executive implements the laws made by the legislature, all right. But we want to examine whether the laws made by the legislature or the laws implemented by the judiciary are appropriate or not, or appropriate according to the constitutional provisions or not. If such laws are violated, each such laws bring the violation of social background. So what happens? It cannot be implemented. It cannot be accepted by the people of the society. It cannot be accepted by the Indians, the citizens of India. So that is judiciary. Judiciary is there to justify, to examine the justiciability of the law. If the judiciary certifies that this law made in the floor of parliament and this law carried by the executive do not bring the welfares or violate the basic principles of the constitution. So, at that time, the judiciary declares such laws are null and void, ultra vires. These laws should not be implemented. These laws should not be carried out. So, it will be stopped. Therefore, judiciary is there to check the balances in between the legislature and the executive. So, this is a check and balance. This is a judicial review. On the other hand, these are, I mean, adoption of the independence of judiciary, separation of judiciary from the executive, and a rule of law and a judicial review. Such are the features of the constitutional system which guarantee, which secure, which protect human rights of the Indian people so far. Again, I would like to tell you that there is right to move to the court of law for what? For the enforcement of fundamental rights. So the Indian citizens have been granted six fundamental rights, six freedoms they are entitled to enjoy. They are required to enjoy such fundamental rights. If the citizens of India feel some of their rights are lost or violated or affected by any other sources, or they have been taken away the fundamental rights from different sources by any powerful institutions. On that case, the citizens are given rights to move to the court of law. For example, under 226 article, a citizen can move to the High Court of his own state for the restoration, for the enforcement of his fundamental rights. Article 32 also guarantees that the citizens must move to the court of law for the enforcement of such fundamental rights. Besides, there are rights of the minorities. There is freedom of religion, rights against exploitation, right to six number of vital freedoms. These rights stand granted and guaranteed. On the other hand, special protection is there. Special protections are made. Provisions have been made for women, children, weaker sections, and the people belonging to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, as well as other backward castes. their rights have been specifically secured by the state machinery. Again, at present, a new right, that is the right to the education of the children, has been incorporated in the list of fundamental rights. So these rights are now being implemented for the these rights are now being implemented for the enforcement of, for the enjoyment of, for giving security of human rights. Above all, there are some other important provisions. The system of free legal aid for the poor. The constitution or the creation of fast track courts. Such courts have been provided for giving the poor, needy people the fast justice. These are called the fast track courts. They are meant for fast justices to the needy people, to the poor people. Then the system of public interest litigation, it is also being adopted in India to supplement the drive for the protection of rights of the people. These, as I tell you, the system of free legal aid for the poor, the creation of fast track court, the system of public interest litigations are now being on process. Then we can discuss regarding our democratic polity. So, India is a republican country. India has adopted a democratic constitution. And remember, there is a parliament form of government in our country. So, these systems, what do you mean by a republic? India is a republic because our president is the first citizen. The Indian president is elected indirectly by an electoral college. Indirectly, the legislatures, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, both the houses, as well as the state legislatures, the elected representatives of state legislatures, the parliamentarians, elected parliamentarians, the elected parliamentarians, the Rajya Sabha, they form an electoral college. They elect our president indirectly. So, our president, as he is elected indirectly, therefore, India is a republican country. Because under a republic, we have adopted two types of heads. One head is our president, the nominal head. Another head is our prime minister, the real head. So there must be similarity, there must be assimilation, cooperation, coordination, collaboration between the titular head and the real head. And in Indian territory, in Indian democracy, both the heads are now working harmoniously, collaboratively. So our republic is no doubt a greatest republic so far the world has ever produced. And Indian democracy is the largest working democracy. On alternate of every 5 years, there is regular elections. Elections are held regularly. The voters are ready to cast their votes in favor of their chosen candidates. So, on the basis of absolute majority, the candidates which has backed the majority number of seats, then such candidates have been declared elected. They take the charge of administration. So, people, the representatives, the parliament, the opinion, all such items are so integrated that one cannot be separated from another. So these are the basic tendencies for the protection of human rights in India. Because a voter thinks, a voter thinks before he goes to the polling station for casting his vote. He must decide the qualities of the contestants, their education, their capabilities, their public tendencies. So a voter must think twice or so many times for casting his votes to the contestants. So, however, our democracy, our democratic form of constitution, our republic, these are the commitments. These are the systematic ways and means for the protection of human rights, no doubt. And there are some commitments. Our government have committed that it must give 100%, 100% protection, 100% guarantee to the human freedoms, human rights. Because in a society, the government or the society or the customs and traditions or the principles or the people, all such things, they get together and form a society. A society cannot go without such elements. So the society must bring all round developments if the people are assimilated, if the people are joined. Thereafter, there is the commitment of a sustainable development in India. There is poverty. There is poverty alleviation. Hunger is there. We face so many diseases. We also face scarcities and a good number of wants. Everything is there. So the government of India is fighting against the poverty alleviation. The government of India is continuing his fightings against hunger, diseases, scarcity, and wants. What does it mean? The sole aim of the government of India is to give the people 100% health, wealth, better condition, better living, high level of living, standard of living, The government wants that each and every people do not go on a hunger. They must clarified from the and wanting side, scarcity and wanting side. So this is the commitment of sustainable developments. There is the protection of rights, freedoms, the protection of rights and freedoms. These are the bedrock of democracy. So Indian society is a pluralistic society. What is the meaning of a pluralistic society? A society with a large amount of socio-economic, religious, linguistic, and cultural diversities. So, in Indian society, such things are found. We have so many languages, scarcities, religions, linguistic, and cultural diversities. So, despite all these items, we are now alert. The government of India is alert to be the cause of protection of human rights and freedoms of all the people. These are the system in our country, and the government of India is now trying is level based for the best protection of human rights of the people in Indian territory.